You've seen those films where someone is kidnapped during the day, is tortured for hours or days, but eventually makes friends with the person who took them and gets away from the violence. Well, those films and everything that goes with them are made up and planned. But for 14-year-old Abby Hernandez, what happened is a story of how she survived and how strong she is. From the moment Abby was taken 3 days before her 15th birthday, the police were on her case. But it wasn't until 9 months later that Abby shocked everyone by walking back in the door on her own. It will seem like a horror movie as you read about how Abby Hernandez was kidnapped and how she got away after 9 months of being held captive. However, this was Abby's real life, or rather, her worst nightmare, which changed her life for good. Abigail Hernandez was born in Manchester, New Hampshire, on October 12, 1998. Her parents are Xenia and Ruben Hernandez, and she goes by the name Abby. People said that Abby was a happy and smart girl. She was a pretty chill person and had a lot of friends. Her words, not mine, were that Abby called herself a tomboy. It was pretty clear from the way she dressed that she loved sports and old rock music. She also had a boyfriend named Jimmy Campbell at the time of the case. Jim and Abby were crazy about each other. Everyone who knew Abby and Jimmy or saw them together said Jimmy treated her like a princess. Unfortunately, Abby's parents split up when she was very young, and Xenia raised her and her sister Sarah. They were having a great time together, and this big change didn't make Abby's light or spirit dim. She never let things that were out of her control bring her down. She was very level-headed and almost always saw the bright side of things. But Abby had no idea that her life was about to change in a big way when she was walking home from school in October 2013 on what seemed like a normal autumn day. Abby's school day on October 9th, 2013 was like any other. She had 3 days left until her 15th birthday, which is a big deal for most teens. She put on a gray sweatshirt, black yoga pants, and black boots with heels for school. Abby loved these boots because her mum Xenia had just bought them for her as an early birthday present. This was the first time she wore them to school. If you know anything about shoes, you know that the first few days in a new pair are the worst. You get sores all over. It hurts your feet to walk, and it sounds and feels awful. Well, Abby felt bad about her choice as soon as she got to school. Miranda, Abby's best friend, said she walked funny all day and her feet hurt a lot. That was the only strange thing about Abby's school day. The school day was over quickly after she went to class and took pictures with her friends. Xenia couldn't wait for her daughter to get home from school though, since Abby didn't come back. Abby usually took the bus to and from school, but Xenia knew that she loved walking back home from school because it was such a short distance. Because of this, Xenia thought that maybe October 9th was one of those days when Abby chose to walk back home, even though her mother didn't know about her bad day with her shoes at this point. But by evening, Abby still hadn't made it home from the afternoon. She called Abby on the phone, but she didn't answer. That's when Xenia felt fear grip her and wouldn't let go. Soon, Xenia went to school and asked the librarian where Abby was. Xenia would forget how to breathe after hearing what the librarian said. The librarian said that Abby had walked out of school hours ago. At 7 p.m. that same day, Xenia called the police right away to say that 14-year-old Abby Hernandez was missing. The detectives got to work right away, and word quickly spread through the small town of Conway. When the police watched the school's CCTV footage, they saw Abby leave the building and head home around 2:29 p.m. She didn't go in a strange or unknown direction. It was just another day. She wore the same clothes every day and wore her rucksack over her shoulder. The police had no reason to think she was running away. There was nothing missing from Abby's house either, so it was very strange that she went missing. Investigators still asked the usual set of questions, and their main goal was to find out if Abby was acting or feeling differently or thinking about running away from something. Everyone who knew Abby thought this was crazy. The police were told that Abby's 15th birthday party was coming up soon and that she was busy planning it, worrying about the theme, the food, and how many friends to invite. She wasn't going to up and leave everyone and everything behind. Every single one of her friends told her that she would never do something like that. Investigators were working as fast as possible, getting Abby's picture all over the news, talking to people in the town, and looking for clues that could lead them to her. While that was going on, a huge search for Abby was started. Several people stepped up to help look for Abby everywhere they could, hoping to find her. Sad to say, they didn't. Searches were done on the ground and in the air, and the FBI got involved with Abby's case pretty quickly. After just a few days, hundreds of tips had come into the police station. Each one was looked over by the police in the hopes of finding useful information about Abby's case. They also held press conferences, often to let people know what was going on with the case, but no one knew where Abby was, so everyone was still on edge. There was also a website made called Bring Abby Home, which had many pictures and videos of Abby. Abby's 15th birthday was only 3 days later, but there was no party. Instead, Abby's family held a vigil, and people in the community sang happy birthday to her and prayed that she was safe. That Xenia was having a very tough time is something that everyone knows. There were times when she felt empty and hopeless, but she had to be strong for her other daughter Sarah and keep her hope for Abby alive. The detectives were still doing everything they could to solve the case. The records from Abby's cell phone were looked at. If Abby's phone was lost, it couldn't be found, but her last known location was about a mile from her home. The police also looked at text messages, but they didn't find anything interesting. For the last time, Abby texted her boyfriend Jimmy. Jimmy was also on his way home from school, but he took the bus. Jimmy was the last person Abby talked to, so the police questioned him. But they quickly learned that Jimmy and Abby had a normal, loving relationship, and Jimmy had nothing to do with Abby going missing. Now it is November 6th, 2013, which is almost a month after Abby went missing. Xenia got the mail while she was home. As she read it, one of the letters with the date, October 23rd, caught her attention. It had been 2 weeks since Abby had been seen last. This letter made Xenia feel like it was important, so she tore it open and read it. Then she read it again and again. She wrote the letter. However, some of the words were not quite right, and Xenia was sure it wasn't how Abby spoke or wrote, but she was sure it was Abby. She wrote in the letter that she loved her family and was safe, but she couldn't tell them where she was. At the end of the letter, Abby told her mum to keep hoping, which was proof that she had indeed run away. The letter was given to the police right away by Xenia, which shocked everyone. She had really run away, right? Why would she do that? How come none of her friends knew about this? But the police knew right away that Abby wasn't running away when they saw the letter. Everything looked too good to be true, and thankfully, the police didn't give up on the case. Detectives also tested the letter and found Abby's DNA on it, which proved that she had written it. However, they didn't think that Abby had made up the things that were in the letter. In the end, the investigators shared this information with the public in the hopes that it would help the investigation. However, it wasn't long before they heard from or found Abby again 3 months later. Now let's go to March 17th, 2014, when a woman was driving 30 miles from Conway and hit someone else's car by accident. After getting out of his car, the driver of the other car was armed and hit the woman several times with it. The attack was terrible, and I'm sure the woman was completely terrified. After this, it was clear that the violent man was arrested. But what does this random attack have to do with the fact that Abby is no longer there? The police just couldn't get rid of the thought that this attacker might have been involved with Abby's disappearance. They didn't tell anyone why they thought what they did, but something about this guy didn't feel right. It turned out that this man was Nathaniel Kibbe, who is 34 years old. Nate loved collecting guns and was just a weird person in general. He was violent and had strong views on the Constitution, gun rights, and other similar issues. Talking about the type of person who thinks the F in F-150 means freedom. Whatever the reason, after arresting Nate, the police wanted to take away all of his guns, dozens of them, and Nate didn't fight them. But when the police got to Nate's house, which was in a remote area a few miles from Conway, they saw a big shipping container hidden in his backyard right away. They even asked Nate what the deal was with this container because it stood out so much. Right away, Nate defended himself by telling the police that they were only there for the guns and that was all they were going to get. The police did leave the property after this short deal, but something about this strange shipping container made them feel very bad. At first, they looked around a bit, but Nate was right. The police were only there to look for his guns, so that's all they could legally do. Once they had the evidence they came for, they left after a few hours. They had no idea that Abigail Hernandez was just outside the door of the shipping container. Nathaniel Kibbe, a very strange and eccentric person, took Abby away. But how did Nate, who Abby didn't know, take her? What did he want from her? And why did he pick Abby in particular? We have to go all the way back to the day Abby disappeared in order to answer that question. A few seconds had passed since Abby was leaving school that day, but she still missed the bus. Even though her new boots hurt her feet a lot, she had to walk the short distance to her house. As she texted Jimmy, her boyfriend, she caught a glimpse of a car pulling up. A man in his 30s was driving. He saw Abby's limp and offered to give her a ride. Abby agreed because she thought the man was being nice, and she got into the stranger's car. This was a bad idea. She didn't know, though, because as far as she knew, Conway was a pretty quiet and safe place. But instead of taking her home, he drove to a parking lot by himself. That's when Abby knew something was very wrong. When she tried to let the driver drop her off right there, he got armed and took Abby down completely. If you haven't already guessed, this man was Nate Kibbe. He went out into the world looking for someone to scare. Anyway, Nate tied Abby's hands together, put a blindfold over her eyes, and made her crouch in the passenger seat leg space so no one could see her. The car finally came to a stop after what seemed like a very long time. Abby was taken out of the car and put down on something soft. The mattress was dirty, and Abby looked around as soon as she took off her blindfold. The room was small, the floors were metal, and the door had latches. The small room's walls were also padded to block out noise, and this time Abby saw the person who had taken her wearing a gold Halloween mask. Nate told Abby that bad things would happen if she ever tried to leave or make a noise. I have no idea how Abby must have been feeling. This is so much worse than what the words scared and terrified can describe. Sadly, Abby was tortured and abused over and over again, almost right away. It was disgusting and cruel to be around Nate. Nate kept her chained for days on end, even though she was already locked up in this huge storage container. Even worse, he would attack her for fun, with anything from a stun gun to a dog shock collar. Not only that, but he was also taken advantage of over and over again. At first, Abby could only stand the and pray that she would make it through alive. One thing she knew for sure, she wanted to live and get back home, even though she was in the worst possible situation. Nate would scare Abby by telling her that everyone was looking for her during her first few weeks in captivity, while the police and Abby's family held press conferences. This was a really cruel and evil way to make Abby feel bad and like she couldn't do anything. She knew that everyone she cared about was out there, only a few miles away, looking for her very badly. It was likely, though, that they wouldn't make it in time. Abby saw her mother cry in front of the cameras. But even though Nate's way of scaring Abby hurt her, it also gave her a reason to live, purpose to stay alive, purpose to keep going, and purpose to maybe get away. After being held captive for 2 weeks, Nate told Abby to write a letter to her mom. Xenia got the same letter on November 6th. Nate thought that this was his plan, to keep the police from looking into it. This proves that Abby did write the letter, and she even used her nails to carve the words "help" and "kidnap" into the paper. Nate, on the other hand, was smarter and found out about it. He scared Abby about what he would do to her, but all he did was make her write another letter, which he then looked over and sent. The didn't stop, though. 6 months into her jail time, though, Abby realized something. Nate was under her control. She was good at controlling him. She felt like she had to give it a try after hearing this. And just like two friends would, Abby and Nate talked about normal things. And Nate quickly formed a strange bond with her, which Abby saw coming. Nate would say that Abby was almost like a daughter to him, which is a whole new level of, what the heck? Nate would also sit down with Abby and talk about his life and the Constitution. Besides taking off her blindfold, he gave Abby books to read. This way, Abby was sure she knew what Nate looked like. Nate gave Abby a cookbook that said Nate Kibbe on it. He also gave her a book. It had been 6 months since Abby had seen Nate, so this was the first time she knew his name. Ayn Rand is an American author who was born in Russia and is best known for creating the philosophical system objectivism. Abby learnt that Nate was a big fan of she. Nate liked the Gadsden flag and libertarianism as well. He would talk to Abby for hours about these topics as if he were a teacher. And Nate also made fake money. This was how he got back at the government, which he hated so much. Abby even helped him out at one point to get his trust and make herself look as mild as possible. Finally, Abby's abuse got worse. But it didn't stop completely. He began to see people working on the street, and guess what? He gave them fake money. This means that Nate not only hired adult workers, but also lied to them, which is again so unbelievable. Well, this would bite him back, and in the end, it would be Abby's way out of jail. Before he talked to the police about the guns and the questions about the shipping container, Nate made Abby write one more letter. The detectives were very close to Abby at the time, but they couldn't do anything. Nate was even more scared after this, so he went up to Abby and told her she knew too much. He also tried to move Abby, but she wasn't aware of where she was being taken because she was blindfolded. But Nate was just joking when he put her in his car, drove around in circles, and put her back in the same shipping container. But do you remember that Nate was seeing adult workers at the time? One of them was a woman named Lauren Monday, who was 27 years old. It was clear that Nate had lied to her by giving her fake money. The next day, Lauren found out the money wasn't real when she went to the store to buy something. Lauren was so mad at Nate that she called him and yelled at him, even threatening to call the police. Nate was smart because he didn't tell Lauren his real name, but he wasn't the smartest because his full name was on the email he sent to Lauren, and Lauren was also able to tell the police about Nate's car. Nate walked into the bunker or container where Abby was after the call with Lauren. He was mad and scared at the same time. She knew better than anyone else not to poke the bear, though. She kept her cool and asked him what was wrong. Nate then went on a rant, and Abby heard the whole thing. She was sick of Nate's abuse and didn't want to be the target of it, so she listened to him rant, even though she didn't want to. That was a good thing, because what happened next surprised even Abby. Nate walked up to Abby, put her clothes in a plastic bag, and told her, "I need you to leave here." Nate didn't plan to take Abby somewhere else like she thought he was going to. Abby was scared to death as he drove and drove and drove. Nate and Abby were getting along well, and Abby usually knew what he would do. But this was different. Abby felt like a goods train hit her when she looked out the window and saw something she knew. It was the same place where Nate took Abby from when he first took her. After stopping the car and telling Abby to get out, she did so right away without any questions. She slammed the door shut and watched Nate drive off. Abby couldn't believe what she was hearing. She was happy to be free, but she was also afraid that Nate would return at any time and take her back to the gross bunker. As she walked the short distance to her house, Abby wore the same clothes she did 9 months ago. When she got there, she opened the door and called for her mum. Xenia was so sad in the living room that she couldn't hear Abby's voice. Really, Xenia thought she was seeing things, but when she saw Abby with her own eyes, she was taken back to October night, when all she wanted was for Abby to walk through the front door. You couldn't even begin to imagine how emotional these two were. This was all Xenia ever wanted and all she could think about, getting her daughter back home. Now, her daughter just walked back into her life, safe and sound, with no hints or build-up at all. That's because Abby was still alone with Nate when she got home, so it wasn't easy for her to talk. Before he let Abby go, Nate told her that he would go after her and her family if she ever called the police. He said she wouldn't like what would happen. She was so scared that she would do anything to keep her family safe, even lie about the person who took her. People had a lot of different thoughts about Abby and her disappearance because of this. A lot of people said Abby was lying and that she had just run away. They thought the whole kidnapping story was just a cover for something else. Everyone was not sure if Abby's disappearance was real or not. Abby and her family went through a terrible event. People in Xenia's community who had been there for her during this whole ordeal were now turning against her and her daughter. With the police's help, Abby finally got the courage to tell them who took her, and Nathaniel Kibbe was arrested in 2014. The state built a case against Nate over the course of almost 3 years. He was charged with making fake money, assault, and kidnapping Abby Hernandez, among other things. Nate was found guilty in the end and given a prison sentence of 45 to 90 years. At his sentencing, a very familiar person showed up. "Hey, Abby Hernandez." What she said on May 16, 2016, was so moving and strong. All of us could learn from how brave she is. That day, Abby walked into court, looked Nate in the eyes, and told him she was sorry for everything he had done to her. Abby stopped taking every moment of her life for granted after she met Nate. Even though she was kidnapped, The experience changed her outlook on life. She promised herself that she would never take another sunset, second, or happy moment in her life for granted. She also said that she values her freedom even more now that she has been kidnapped. Right now, Abby cuts hair and is very proud of her child, whom she loves very much. She is living a quiet and private life, and we can only hope that she is getting over this terrible event that changed her life. Abby fought, and she still does. Not only did she keep going even when things were at their worst, she did it for herself and her family as well. I can't even begin to imagine what Abigail went through. This is not something you can make up, but her determination and bravery, even when she was facing evil, teach us all a lesson. We should never give up, even when the odds are against us. That concludes today's true crime case. If you found it as gripping as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, every case tells a story.